This video essay will demonstrate the ways in which the infantilization of women has been sexualized in media in order to cater to the male fantasy, and how some filmmakers have aimed to subvert this. So what is infantilization? It is the portrayal or treatment of an adult as if they were a child, often demeaning and treating them as not an equal. This has become a reoccurring depiction of female love interests in media, promoting the male power fantasy of dominance and control over naive women, instilling this power imbalance. Women's portrayal in media and the infantilization of femininity has led to a stereotype of women being vulnerable, weak, and childlike, thus undermining them as adults and altering their position in relation to power in society. Key point 1. The immaturity of women has been made to cater to the male power fantasy. In the 1960 film The Time Machine, a time traveler goes into the future where he meets his love interest, Weena. Weena is one of the future human species, the Eloi, that lack a sense of mental urgency or awareness. She has a very childlike mentality, often speaking in simple sentences, as seen here.
Weena? How do you spell it?
Spell?
She is incapable of grasping simple things like written language, as well as having a very childlike excitement, energetically copying the traveler's writing in the sand. Weena is presented as having very little personality outside of her naivety and infatuation for the traveler, catering to the male power fantasy as she can only rely on him. The traveler is shown to be aware of this power he holds over Weena, how she's mentally that of a child.
Only little children are frightened by the dark. And you are a little child, aren't you?
Yet he still chooses to instigate a relationship with her. Similarly, in the 1968 Planet of the Apes, Taylor comes to a world where the people are nothing more than mute animals. He eventually finds comfort from that of an animalistic woman, even going so far as naming her Nova.
Nova. You Nova. No.
Nova lacks the understanding of language, her mind being that of an animal's. She does not have the capability to understand or say no to Taylor. Taylor is aware of this power he holds over her, aware that she cannot understand him.
Do you love me, I wonder? Can you love, I wonder? You're not as smart as Stewart, but you're the only girl in town.
Yet he still instigates a relationship with her. This inability to talk or disagree leaves Nova as a blank slate for Taylor to project his own desires onto.
No one will listen to me. Only you.
She only clings to him for his perceived desire. The infantilized woman in this relationship has little thought or personality outside of the man. To her, he is her whole world. The woman has to rely entirely on the more experienced man, giving him all the power and dominance in the relationship. This naivety of women depicted in these films cater to the male power fantasy, specifically having this power, this control over these inexperienced women. But what if the roles were reversed, the man in the relationship being the naive and experienced one? How does this portrayal compare? How does it still cater to the male fantasy? Key point 2. How immature women are sexualized in film compared to immature men being instead played for comedy, and how it still caters to male fantasy. In the 1988 film Big, a 13-year-old Josh makes a wish to be, as the title suggests, big. Taking a literal approach to the naivety of Josh, showing the perspective of an actual child stuck in an adult's body. Throughout it, his childishness has been portrayed in a comedic light, rather than getting sexualized.
I want to spend the night with you.
Do you mean sleep over?
When Susan eventually finds out the truth that Josh is in fact a child inside of an adult's body.
So, what are you, 15, 16?
13.
Oh.
She completely stops all sexual interest in him, and although she still cares for him, she will not take advantage of his innocence. Similarly, in the 1999 Blast from the Past, Adam is stunted and naive from being only around his parents and away from the outer world for most of his life. His inexperience of the outside world is always played for comedy and never something framed as sexual.
I tried to give the driver this, but he wouldn't take it. Seems kind of angry.
His inexperience is even initially framed as annoying to his love interest Eve.
Oh, I knew this would happen. You're like a lost puppy.
Can't you just talk to me for 1 second?
But his boyish charm slowly makes her fall for him. Compared to the naive women characters who have been written to be nothing more than side characters devoid of much personality beyond their immaturity and hanging off every word of the male protagonist, the naive male characters are the focus, the protagonist, filled with lots of personality in hand with their immaturity. Rachel Sampson makes a good point, stating that, quote, "The love interests fall in love with these boys/men in spite of their inexperience, not because of it," end quote. And that, quote, "These men are not naked and objectified. Their storyline doesn't surround sex, and their ineptitude is comical, not pitiful or undermined," end quote. While not as problematic as the sexualizing naivety of women, this still caters to male fantasy. Rather than dominance and control over women, this portrayal caters to the desire of men to be accepted and loved despite traits like immaturity, it even sometimes being framed as attractive. Boyish charm helping get the girl. While this fantasy doesn't objectify and demean women as much as infantilizing them does, it does normalize an unrealistic expectation, the fantasy that not only behaving like an immature man-child is okay, but is even something that makes you desirable.
He's a baby man.
But what if now there was a piece of media that subverted the depiction of infantilized women? And how does it comment on the male power fantasy? Key point 3. How Ex Machina subverts the portrayal of an infantilized woman. Ex Machina from 2014 uses the guise of artificial intelligence to be able to have a wondrously intelligent yet naive woman through the android Ava. Ava is initially first displayed as a curious, bright-eyed woman. Her quote-unquote love interest Caleb initially talks down to her, uncertain of her knowledge of the world as she's never been outside.
So we need to break the ice. Do you know what I mean by that?
Throughout the movie, she continuously exhibits childlike behaviors, often looking to Caleb for answers.
What's it a drawing of?
Don't you know?
No.
I thought you would tell me.
This appeals to Caleb's own desires of wanting to feel needed and superior. Everything Ava does, from the way she acts to the way she dresses, is all to cater towards Caleb's desires and fantasies. David Glantz describes Ex Machina as, quote, "a film about male fantasy of having a perfect and subservient sex robot," end quote. Throughout the film, we are led to believe that Ava is this perfect ideal woman, specially crafted to Caleb's desires, that needs Caleb to save her and love her. But this fantasy gets broken. Ava is not what Caleb has built in his mind. She isn't this bright-eyed child she displayed, but a front, in order for her to be the one to take control. With Caleb falling for her manufactured self, she was able to use him to take control and save herself. Quote, "The drama in Ex Machina comes from the ultimate male fear, a woman who fights back and asserts her independence," end quote. In conclusion, infantilization has been displayed in film in various ways to cater to a range of male fantasies, both the male power fantasy of having dominance and control over naive women, and the fantasy of women loving men despite their naivety. But films such as Ex Machina has been able to subvert this portrayal of a power imbalance, showing that this depiction of a subservient, dependent woman is only that of a fantasy, and that women can take control and hold their own independence of their own lives, independent from male expectations.